Coming up,
Regardez comment la couleur de notre terre a changé.
parts of East Africa are experiencing some of the worst drought conditions they've ever seen.
Hakuna mvua imekaa sana bila kunyesha.
The rains have failed again and again and again. Hospitals running out of power and water.
The area is so much contaminated.
People battling to stay afloat. With no water falling from above, Kenyans look underground.
The steam water is all year round.
A champion swimmer takes a lap around a Florida bay.
Picking up plastic. It's insane.
And we visit one of Turkey's most renowned universities where researchers are working on a plan to change the world.
Millions of people can get purified water by the help of membrane technology.
This is Just 2 Degrees on TRT World. On our last episode, we talked a bit about the drought in the Horn of Africa that's wiped out livestock and crops and has been pushing millions of people to the brink of starvation. Well, Kenya isn't technically in the HOA, but it does border the region that includes Somalia and Ethiopia, where a 6th consecutive rainy season has failed. And now the situation is getting even worse. Hospitals in Kenya's Garissa County are being forced to close due to lack of water and electricity. This is potentially devastating for a region that already has the highest mortality rate in the country. Well, meanwhile, the drought situation isn't restricted to Garissa County. People in Kenya's Rift Valley region are also suffering from acute water shortages. But they're hopeful a geothermal steam that's originating from deep within the earth can be captured to produce clean drinking water for everyone. Here's Dominic.
Nakuru County lies within East Africa's vast Rift Valley. Hundreds of thousands of people here struggle every day to find water. A situation compounded by one of the worst droughts the country's ever seen. There is no water from above, so residents are looking underground. Rift Valley is a geologically active area with volcanoes, hot springs and geysers. It's dangerous to dig wells here, but villagers have found a way to trap and condense any steam near geysers.
The steam water is all year round. We also supplement it with rainwater, but rainwater comes during the rainy seasons, and after some time it gets depleted. But the steam water runs throughout, and also it is safe for drinking.
Freshwater rivers are few and far between in Nakuru County, making these geothermal tanks a lifeline for residents. The bigger the pipes and tanks, the more the water is collected. To increase the amount of steam condensing, the tanks are fitted with long slanting metallic pipes through which cold air enters and residual steam escapes.
The area is so much contaminated. We have the greenhouses around that area, and this water is running toward that lake. When we get that water from that, the water will be it's more much contaminated for us to use in our domestic. So that the government has come up with this point of just getting this water.
Hii maji huwa tunatumia juu huku hakuna mito, hakuna rivers ama lakes. Sasa huku huwa inabidi tu tunategemea hii tu. Although ni safi, but inatoka kidogo sana. Haitoshi, lakini hiyo ndio tunatumia tu, sababu hakuna kitu ingine, mahali ingine ya kutoa maji huku. Maji ni hii tu. Hakuna mvua imekaa sana bila kunyesha.
Kenya's electricity generating company KenGen provides piped water to residents, but they say it's untreated and exposes them to waterborne diseases. To address this, the government has allocated communal land where villagers harvest steam. Steve Okoth is a geologist at the Ministry of Water, Sanitation and Irrigation. He says geothermal steam water is environmentally friendly.
These rivers disappear in these fractures. That is why you are not able to see any river. But the water is coming from a Mau area and then is flowing into these fractures. So it is renewable as long as there is still rain in the Mau and the water is flowing.
Geothermal steam can't meet everyone's water needs in Kenya, but for now, residents are grateful for the little they get. Dominic Branomondi, Just 2 Degrees.
Well, now to the other side of the continent, where the UN warns 48 million people in West and Central Africa will face acute food shortages between June and August. A record 45,000 of those in the Sahel are expected to face what's described as catastrophic hunger. That's a level close to famine. And this is for several reasons: lack of rainfall, as well as the war in Ukraine that's caused food and fertilizer shortages. Instability is also to blame. Countries across the Sahel region, including Mali and Burkina Faso, are also battling an insurgency that so far killed thousands of people and displaced around 2.5 million others. Well, to discuss the ongoing problems and potential ways to mitigate them, I spoke with Omar El-Mawi, who's a climate activist based in Nairobi, Kenya.
The current droughts are affecting countries all over the Horn of Africa, including Kenya, because they've been quite severe. In some of the countries, these are some of the worst droughts they've experienced, in generations. And what this means is that now, because of lack of rainfall and because our economies are majorly dependent on the weather pattern, it's affected a lot our economic activities, including agriculture, people who are doing fishing and different other things that we're doing within the whole Horn of Africa and Kenya in general. And what this has now caused is therefore, it's not just people, economic activities being affected, but actually it's lives and livelihoods. It's people who are dependent on these resources to feed their families. They're dependent on these resources to sort of also progress as communities and development. And therefore, this is really, really significant. For Kenya, for instance, if you look at the last national determined contributions that we had reported on, we are losing about 3 to 5% of our GDP every year because of climate impact. And what this means is that it's about 3 to 5 billion US dollars that we're losing every year because of climate impact. And the sad thing is that despite Kenya and Africa being one of the most affected continents when it comes to climate change, it's done the least, and it's the least responsible in terms of the greenhouse emissions that are associated with climate change. And therefore, there's that disparity between those who are actually causing the harm and those who are actually feeling it. And Kenya becomes one of those areas. It's why, by far and large, the African continent, and Kenya, including Kenya, has been very on the front runners in terms of trying to push for loss and damage, for financing around loss and damage, so that we can be able to make sure that all these impacts that we're facing, it's the people who've actually caused them that are bearing the brunt and the cost.
Omar, we're just hearing about news from northern Kenya, I believe it is, where they've discovered a geothermal vent, so to speak, and they're trying to get squeezed water from this. Are there any other projects in Kenya and in the region where they're trying to combat these water shortages with innovative projects like this?
There are others, but the unfortunate thing is we're not doing it because most it's investment, and our countries don't have the financial muscles to be able to go ahead and do these projects by themselves, and therefore they're all getting resources for fossil fuels, because everyone who wants to invest, they want to know that they're getting something out of it. So whenever there's a discovery for oil, for gas, and other fossil fuels, you're seeing a push and a scramble for everyone wanting to come to be involved. But it's rarely that you hear people have discovered, water in different parts. For an example I would give is in Turkana, which is an area that's very rich on oil reserves. We also know that it's quite rich on oil reserves, on water reserves, but when no one is coming in to try and tap into that. But not just to complain. I mean, you've mentioned a good example where we are having the Rift Valley area in Nakuru, where a geothermal resource also has to water. And from what I've heard and from the people I've talked to, it seems that it's because it's not a miracle that this has happened. It's sort of because there are not many rivers that you're seeing in the Rift Valley area because of the encampment and how the area looks like. You will see most of the water is entrapped within this geothermal sectors. And what this means is, therefore, this water has to come from somewhere, and mostly it's the Mau forest or other places that are close by. And therefore, if we don't do enough to sort of curb the climate impact and make sure that we stop the forest cutting, which now our government has just declared that beginning in July, they're actually going to be resuming, allowing people to cut timber in forests. And what this means is, therefore, even this the silver lining that we're seeing on the clouds, despite this storm, this climatic storm, actually it might even be worse in the next few months, if not years.
We're getting, unfortunately, very used to hearing about water issues in that part of the world. For example, in Kenya, where there's water shortages in the north, are we seeing water shortages creep down to like the capital in Nairobi and other major cities?
No, we're not, because the priorities are being given in the major cities. Even some of these resources are found in the outskirts of Nairobi, of Mombasa, and other places. But the priority is because the rich people, the people who have more rights than others are based within these areas. The industries, the manufacturers, all of them are within urban centers. Then all of the water is being brought into these areas, and that's why you're seeing, communities like a very close place where I'm staying in Mombasa called Kwale. They're having water shortages despite a big chunk of the water coming from their rivers. And this is part of the inequalities that we're speaking about, because resources have to benefit those communities that are closer to them first before we think about sending them to other people. And in this case, it's actually wrong and wrongdoing by actually taking the resources from the community, leaving them with nothing to utilize even for their own domestic consumption, just so that the people living in major cities can benefit from the same.
Well, one of West Africa's biggest stars, Mermaid Merle, has long been an activist in the climate crisis. He's been committed to development challenges in Africa and even opened a solar-powered irrigation project in Senegal to fight desertification. This guy has star power. To combat desertification, Goodwill Ambassador, congrats to him. The irrigation project he began will train people to start similar schemes in their own communities. Desertification is one of the main drivers of people leaving Senegal for dangerous migration routes.
We are tackling climate change impact, but also fighting desertification on the African continent, especially in my region where we are just not far away from the desert, and we see it coming to us. And it had an impact because people who don't get more opportunities to do agriculture, fishing, and many more will have to, I can't say run away from their places, go to the big cities where nothing is planned for them there. And then later on, some of the young ones just take the boats to go to Spain or some of these places, or just try to cross the desert. And it's really dangerous. We did lose a lot of lives.
Well, it isn't just African countries dealing with water challenges or preparing in different ways to confront them. Many others are. Here in Turkey, a university famous for its science programs has designed a machine that can separate carbon dioxide, one of the main greenhouse gases, from various gas compositions. It's hoped this so-called membrane technology, which could also be used for water treatment, could be put to large-scale use against the climate crisis. Membrane technology sounds extremely scientific, but can you break down for us exactly what it is and how it works?
Membrane technology has a tremendous importance in chemical technology as well, and it is used in a broad range of applications, from water treatment, gas separation, to dye separation, and pharmaceutical separation as well nowadays. Membrane is a semi-permeable material which allows to permeate the one component and reject the others. Therefore, separation takes place. We generally use driving forces for the separation, like pressure difference, temperature difference, or concentration difference. In membrane technology, two properties are important in order to define that our membrane works well. One of them is the gas permeability, the other is the gas selectivity. If we have a high gas permeable membranes, which means that we can have a low investment and operation cost, which will decrease the required membrane area and the required driving forces. If we have a high selective membranes, this means that we will end up with a high purified gases. Therefore, compared to the other well-known gas separation technologies, membrane technology has some many advantages, like low-cost investment, environmentally friendly features, ability to be used as a combined version with the other separation techniques, etc.
Talk about this large machine behind you. What does it do?
This is a central lab in Institute of Nanotechnology. We characterize the nanomaterials that we synthesize for different type of application, not specific for membrane technology. There are some SEM image equipment, TEM, XPS, different type of equipments that are here. And the one behind me is combine them. It's a homemade machine, combine whole type of equipment that we used here.
What types of applications can membrane technology be used for?
Membrane technology can be used in a variety of applications. There are well-known applications as well. For example, it is used in food industry for the manufacturing of dairy products, and also it can be used in automotive industry for the recovery of electropainting bags. And well-known examples are the use in water treatment, like reverse osmosis membranes. Millions of people can get purified water by the help of membrane technology. And also dialysis membranes, probably you have heard it before. By using dialysis membranes, we can care the survival of a large amount of people suffering from kidney diseases. And also, nowadays, it is most popular in gas separation. Separation of acidic gases like carbon dioxide from flue gas, from natural gas, and hydrocarbon separation as well, or oxygen enrichment, hydrogen production, etc., purification, etc.
So what's the importance of membrane technology for the planet?
Membrane technology is a promising method for the separation of water, gas, and also organic solvent. And we use it, their efficiency is very high especially. It has some advantages than other conventional methods such as distillation, extraction, etc. And we need low energy by using membrane technology. And we can separate gases and water with high efficiency by using membrane.
For example, for separation of flue gases, natural gases, if we find a proper membrane material, therefore we can easily separate these greenhouse gases, probably the temperature rise will drop, and eventually I hope these disasters will be diminished, natural disasters.
Well, back on the African continent, the Black Mambas is a group dedicated to protecting and conserving South African wildlife. And they're made up mostly of women. They began as a concept designed to address a problem that emerged back in 2013 when rhinoceros poachers targeted the country's Balule landscape. The Black Mambas anti-poaching unit believes the war against poaching won't be won by guns and bullets, but also through local communities and education. Rhino poaching is driven by the demand for the animal's horns. They're viewed as a status symbol in countries like Vietnam and China. Rhino horns are also ground into a fine powder or manufactured into tablets to treat nosebleeds, strokes and fevers. The Black Mamba says there's no proof the horns have any medicinal value. Well, lions too are hunted for their bones, which are used to produce so-called potions and Chinese remedies. It's harder to detect when lions have been poached. Their bodies are so much smaller than rhinos. That makes it easier for scavengers to consume their remains. Their deaths are then often seen as natural. The demand for elephant ivory soared in the 1970s. Most of it leaving Africa was taken legally. And over 80% of the ivory came from poached elephants. An international trade ban came into effect in 1990, eliminating some of the major ivory markets, but not entirely. And pangolins are the least known of the 4 poached animals. They're shy, armor-plated animals, commonly known as scaly anteaters. Having a pangolin fetus for dinner is regarded as an impressive status symbol in China. Well, G7 countries met in Japan in mid-April in a ministers' meeting that focused on balancing immediate energy security needs with the urgency of responding to the climate crisis. Targets included reducing reliance on natural gas, phasing out coal and fossil fuels, expanding renewable energy options, ending plastic pollution, and decarbonizing transportation. Sarah has more.
Fossil fuels must go. That was the message at the latest G7 ministers meeting on climate, energy, and environment in Sapporo, Japan. UN climate change chief Simon Steele addressed the ministers in a tweet, echoing the urgency underlined by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's latest report. The IPCC has left no doubt we must accelerate our exit from all fossil fuels if we are to reach our global climate goals. This year, we have an opportunity to make that course correction. G7 leadership is indispensable to seize it and deliver a clear 2030 roadmap at COP28. And nations meeting in Sapporo promised to speed up the shift towards more renewable energy. The group of 7 rich nations reset their goals for offshore wind and solar power, with faster targets for renewable energy.
かつてないエネルギー危機の中で気候変動問題の解決に向けた対策、そしてエネルギーの安全保障、この確保を同時に推進することが必要であります。加えて経済成長も進めなきゃいけないということであります。非常に難しい舵取りを求められている局面です。
Japan hosted the ministers' meeting in Sapporo ahead of the G7 summit in Hiroshima to promote a pathway to renewable energy. But Tokyo will struggle to make the transition. As a nation with virtually no major natural resources, Japan imports more than 90% of its energy needs. Along with several other nations, it sees Russia as an important source of natural gas and oil, despite Moscow's ongoing invasion of Ukraine.
G7 の国々から何か私に対して、あるいは日本に対して、ロシアからの依存度を減らすべきだとか、なんとかっていうのを私は直接聞いてはいません。
With lives in the balance, a renewable strategy will have to be as reliable as fossil fuels to have any chance of replacing them. Sarah Balter, Just 2 Degrees.
And that's it for our show. Before we leave you, a competitive swimmer with a Guinness World Record for longest swim is raising awareness about plastic pollution. It's an interesting mermaid tale. You'll see why. We'll see you next time. Bye.
4, 3, 2, go!
Merle Levand begins a 48-kilometer loop around Florida's Biscayne Bay. This isn't another ordinary swim for the 4-time Guinness World Record holder. Mermaid Merle, as she's been nicknamed, is here to collect trash.
Plastic! It's insane! My bag is full and I haven't been here even 4 hours. I don't understand. We need to do better.
Biscayne Bay is home to rich marine diversity. Dolphins, manatees, seagrass, coral. But this vulnerable ecosystem is under pressure from increasingly stronger storms.
We are driving in an ocean
In mid-April, uncharacteristically heavy amounts of rain fell across southern Florida. The state's Department of Environmental Protection says pollutants from storm runoff were a major issue.
And it bothers me knowing that we just had 1,000-year rain, the heaviest rain. The bay is so high tide. It had even a worry if I can swim. And then you're walking around day after this environmental event and you're seeing like people still leaving plastic bottles everywhere. And then of course it's gonna go and get stuck on the drains, and that's why the flood is building up.
During her swim, Merle picked up as much floating trash as she could carry, and she did it while wearing a mermaid's tail to show just how hard it is for dolphins who get stuck in fishing nets and plastic. By the end of her round, she collected approximately 9 kilograms of litter.
If this is not shocking, then I don't know what to say.